There are innumerable dangers which threaten the sanctity of the Imperium of man, and indeed the very existence of humankind. Some of these seek to drag the very soul screaming from your still living body, whilst others seek purely to watch the order of civilization burn in the ashes of war or revolution. Join us while we count down the top 5 threats to the stability of the galactic empire known as the Imperium of Man. Make sure you stay tuned until the end, where we'll discuss a bonus threat which I think you'll really enjoy and which I'd love to hear your thoughts on in the comments. It is no secret that the greatest warlord the orc race has seen in 8 millennia has risen to the ascendancy not only in the eyes of the brutally competitive warlords of that savage race, but also by the bloody standards of the orcs' twin deities, Bjork and Mork. Gazghkul Thraka has displayed the uncanny ability to unite what could be the most fractious species in the galaxy, at the same time as conducting brutal campaigns against his direst of enemies, the Imperium of Man. Covered recently in a video I will link on the screen and description, the orcs are one of the largest Xenos threats jeopardizing what stability still exists within the Imperium. Following the fracturing of the galaxy at the hands of Abaddon the Despoiler and his minions. In the most recent lore, Gazghkul has been gifted a sacred mission by Bjork and Mork, one that will place orcs as the dominant power within the galaxy. For all the anarchy and war that Gazghkul has sown from sector to sector, he must continue this savage pilgrimage across the stars, for the more boys that wage war against the weaker races, the more numerous and powerful the orc race grows, thus reaching a critical mass which would doubtless flood all civilizations from one end of the galaxy to the other in an unending war, the likes of which has never been seen, even in the ancient days of the old ones. Gazghkul knows his mission is not to stay rooted in one conflict. His purpose is to bring about this green tide of savagery, with himself as supreme warlord. Though Gazghkul has most recently known defeat at the hands of Wolf Lord Ragnar Blackmane at the Battle of Krongar, we all know orcs are never truly defeated in battle, and Gazghkul has not only recovered from his injury, but has been improved beyond anyone's wildest reckoning, thanks to the efforts of Mad Doc Grotznik. It's high time the orcs presented a truly credible threat within the wider narrative, and whilst Gazghkul has displayed strategic genius as well as brutal cunning during his campaigns against the Imperium, he's still not quite as powerful or accomplished as the orc known as the Beast from the 32nd millennium. As it is, Gazghkul has proven that his presence alone can cause a galaxy-wide migration of orcs to rally to his cause. Should Gazghkul choose to begin making his way to more strategic locations within the Imperium, this would indeed put pressure on the Imperium that it can ill afford to defend against right now, especially with the threat of High Fleet Leviathan in the Galactic West. I believe this is quite some time away though, because we know Gazghkul is on a mission to cause yet more destruction and war across more sectors prior to triggering this galaxy-spanning green tide. If Gazghkul can gather yet more orcs to his banner before making the trek towards Terra, this could invariably result in a more high-profile character's attention from the Imperium, such as the Lord Solar, or even Rabute Gilliman himself. Interestingly, the Necron race provide a hope for humanity that the ever-hungry Xenos species known as the Tyranids could be defeated once and for all. Though conversely, this is not due to any aid being offered by these metallic hordes of automaton, but rather szerak, the lord of the Necron race, plans to preserve the human race for his own nefarious plans. As most people are aware, eons prior to the current era Indomitus, the Necron race entered a deep sleep upon their tomb worlds, and Szerak the Silent King travelled beyond the borders of the Milky Way galaxy on a self-imposed exile. Ashamed in himself for the horrific act he had unwittingly committed upon his people in feeding their souls to the Catan star gods. Within this current era, this truly ancient lord of the Necron race has returned from his self-atonement to a galaxy riven by war, where the supernatural has manifested from beyond the planes of insanity, and the predations of the Tyranid hive fleets threaten to consume all in their path. There are little material matters which concern the High King Szerak, though maintaining the lives of at least a portion of humanity to successfully undo the biotransference he foolishly condoned eons ago is his highest priority. To ensure his people, the necron, have bodies to transfer what remains of their souls back into, Szerak must ensure the major threats to the human race are defeated. This is so humanity does not go extinct, and really, one would assume, to take into account that Szerak's people wouldn't have to battle these same threats once they were relocated into what are physically weaker bodies. To aid the Silent King in this endeavour, he has enlisted the aid of cryptech technomancer Xeras, the necron originally responsible for configuring the process to enable the mass biotransference in the first place. Currently within the most up-to-date lore, the many nobles loyal to Szerak have been directing their armies to push back Imperial resistance in the Nephilim sector, among several pockets of space on the fringes of the Milky Way galaxy, to create multiple pariah nexus which cut off the material realm from the warp. Within these areas of space, it is said humans can become affected by the condition called the stilling, wherein they simply just give up and stand or sit idle until eventually succumbing to the ravages of hunger or dehydration or the necrons themselves. These events present excellent raiding opportunities for the necron dynasties, specifically Cerus, who requires a constant stream of live slave subjects to conduct his horrific experiments upon. In a massive coordination of strategic excellence and martial feat, a joint strike force of Imperial Fists, Black Templars, Sisters of Battle, and Death Corps of Krieg have held back the High King's armies long enough to alert the returned Primarch Rabute Gilliman of the large pariah nexus forming within the Nephilim sector. Given these events culminated towards the beginning of 9th edition 40k, will we be treated soon to a showdown between the Silent King and the Emperor's avenging son? Or will the two come to an agreement of sorts to concentrate their efforts on mutual enemies? Perhaps the Silent King will more so seek to end Rabute, figuring the human race will be more vulnerable as a result. Or maybe he will attempt to capture him, seeking to transform his own soul into Rabute's Primarch form, a fitting body to host the High King of the Necron race. The Necrons have existed for eons within the Milky Way galaxy, but will they be the sole rulers of it when all is finally said and done? The threat the Necrons pose to humankind is dire indeed, especially a united Necron race with a powerful combatant and master strategist at the helm in the form of Szerak. Do you believe they should be rated number 4 of 5 topmost threats to the Imperium? If not, where would you place them? The hive mind has caught the entire galaxy within its jaws. The Tyranid race cannot be reasoned or bargained with, and they will offer no quarter. From one end of the galaxy to the other, Tyranid hive fleets encroach upon the Imperium's domain, having drifted towards the beacon of our thriving galaxy from the cold void of dead space, the outer territories beyond the Milky Way, which nobody has returned from, not with their sanity intact. Slowly but surely, the hive mind draws shut these jaws to crush the realms caught between them. The various Tyranid hive fleets present a truly dire threat to all species, but especially to a scattered, bewildered Imperium of man. As living bio-fleets float from system to system, and before them drive the shadow of the warp, a curtain of null shielding which blocks out a prey world's ability to send astropathic calls for aid, all a defending system can do against these numberless swarms of horrors is man the walls and pray to the god Emperor that their grit and determination are enough to beat back the horrors which the hive mind births. Gorging their living bioships upon the fertile planets which comprise humanity's domain, the Tyranid species are not interested in conquest or subjugation. They ravage these worlds so completely that no life form can hide. The prey worlds unlucky enough to suffer the attention of the tyranids are naught but lifeless husks. Within the most recent lore at the dawn of 10th edition 40k, a new High Fleet Leviathan tendril, the most numerous Tyranid invasion to date, has begun its dark work in the western portion of the galaxy, within Segmentum Pacificus. Given the close proximity to Segmentum Solar and therefore Terra, the High Lords of Terra have organised elite strike forces called Soulblade Fleets, which consist primarily of Space Marines and Custodes, which have been built with the intent to strike quickly at the encroaching Tyranid fleets, bolstering local Astra Militarum and PDF defence forces stationed within Pacificus to halt the Tyranid approach. There are far more Tyranid fleets present within the galaxy other than this though, with the further High Fleet Leviathan tendrils having approached from underneath the galactic plane, High Fleet Hydra to the galactic south, and Tyranid High Fleets Behemoth, Gorgon, Kraken, Jormungandr, and Moloch approaching between the southeast to northeast respectively. Truly this is a dire time for the Imperium, and we can only hope that with the deployment of Space Marine Apothecary Biologus, this newly created specialist role can begin to uncover new ways to more effectively combat the Tyranid menace. This next one may shock you, but it is the Imperium itself in the form of the ecclesiarchy. The Church of the Emperor has been the most politically powerful entity within the Imperium of Man, and so arguably the galaxy, for almost 10 millennia now. This faith has led to soldiers of the Emperor such as the Adeptus Sororitas being able to perform martial miracles during battle. Various saints being born such as Celestine herself, as well as providing the bravery and motivation pure zealotry can, enabling baseline humans to confront horrors within the deep dark void. As we know, the galaxy-spanning authoritarian state of the Imperium of Man is more easily imposed and allowed to flourish through the utilization of religious worship to enforce these standards. Sadly, this devolution of mindset from the Emperor's great atheistic ideal of the imperial truth has meant everything from everyday life to technology has been shrouded in mysticism, translating to a lack of progressive thought or scientific breakthrough. Most recently, we have experienced the return of two Primarchs, mighty sons of the Emperor which have been returned to the narrative against all odds. Given both Rabute Gilliman and Lionel Johnson are staunch champions of the Emperor's secular tenets, this will no doubt bring these demigod beings into conflict with the ecclesiarchy, in one form or another. Though forbidden since the beheading of Goj Van Dyer to maintain men-at-arms, the Church still maintains one of the mightiest military forces within the Imperium, not only in the Adeptus Sororitas, but also the trillions of faithful fanatics who would lay down their lives without a second thought. This doesn't begin to count for those of the Adeptus Astartes who conform to the tenets of the imperial cult, such as the Black Templars or the newly created Sons of the Phoenix of the Ultima founding. There is no way that the officials of the ecclesiarchy would accept any being to denounce the Emperor's divinity, even if the two returned Primarchs were to unite publicly, announcing the reintroduction of the imperial truth. Though on the same note, Rabute himself, during the Dark Imperium novels, has personally wondered on how to be rid of the ecclesiarchy without further fracturing an already weakened Imperium, and we know from the Lion's new novel that he has also learnt of this practice of worship, which he abhors, as you would expect. At this point, we can only speculate on how this particular portion of the narrative may advance, though personally, I think it will have something to do with our final bonus point. Our final point, besides our bonus one, is the most insidious influence within the galaxy, originating from the tumultuous realm of the Immaterium. Chaos' ability to corrupt, not to mention greatly influence major events across the galaxy, has been cemented through their schemes, which came to fruition when their champions brought the entire Imperium to its knees during the Horus Heresy, even mortally wounding the Emperor of Mankind himself. The threats that chaos pose to the human race are as myriad in their nature as they are malign. Very few beings within the entire history of mankind, or indeed any other xenos species, have proven able to fortify themselves against its temptations and corruption. The only beings within the Imperium thought to be able to withstand its influence indefinitely are the purest of Adeptus Astartes, that is the Grey Knights chapter, and the bodyguards and companions of the Emperor himself, the Custodes. The very nature of chaos is in itself chaotic, meaning that the overall faction is not united, but is indeed in a constant flux, the champions and armies of the four main powers constantly competing against each other for both the favour of their deity and to achieve ever more influence for their dark master within the great game, whether they serve khorne, tzeentch, nurgle or slaanesh. Most recently, the self-appointed War Master of Chaos, Abaddon the Despoiler, has united many of the followers of the ruinous powers, leading them to a great victory against the Imperium, which has torn the galaxy in two, creating the gaping warp rift known as the Cicatrix Maledictum. This is fortuitous for Abaddon and his followers, for with the coming of Lionel Johnson, the confusion sown by this warp rift has made it much harder for the Lion to unite with other loyalist forces. But what is Abaddon's current movements to bring him closer to his overall end goal of finishing what Horus began, that is, slaying the Emperor? We know that Abaddon and Vashtor share an uneasy alliance, one of mutual beneficence, in that the War Master of Chaos has gained powerful weapons from the partnership in the forms of the Arks of Omen, and the demon Vashtor will acquire as a result a truly powerful weapon, quite possibly forged by the Old Ones themselves, which he intends to use to damage, if not completely overthrow, the Imperium of Man. At the conclusion of the Arks of Omen campaign, Abaddon and Vashtor's efforts to construct the key, which it is said opens the lock barring accessibility to this weapon, has been successful, though they must still locate the vault itself, with the Imperium in hot pursuit in the form of the Inquisition, the Lion, and likely both the Dark Angel and Blood Angel Space Marine chapters, though this will no doubt stretch into further campaign books, though that has not formally been announced yet. So it is that not only does the influence of chaos rot the Imperium's ideals from the inside out, its military presence within the material plane has not been this powerful since the Horus Heresy itself. Truly, Abaddon has achieved great feats in recent years, though whether, and indeed how, he will press this advantage now that the two resurrected loyalist Primarchs are aware of his plans, remains to be seen. Our bonus threat is the return of the Emperor. More than ever, we are seeing novels produced by Black Library which link together characters from the Horus Heresy with the current era Indomitus, which cements story arcs and lore in a way that, in previous years, we only had codexes and white dwarfs to do. Now, spoiler warning here for two very recently published works in Cypher Lord of the Fallen and Lion Son of the Forest, but these two novels, both centered around Dark Angel characters as the main protagonists, contain detailed plots to resurrect the Emperor. Within Cypher Lord of the Fallen, this takes the form of Cypher himself attempting to slay the Emperor, before the big man tells Cypher not yet, and Lion Son of the Forest, wherein the corrupt, fallen Knight Captain Seraphax plans to resurrect the Emperor by again slaying him. It has also been mentioned throughout various stories over the last few years that the Golden Throne is in fact failing. Could the Emperor's recent efforts to communicate with his sons and the likes of Cypher be due to the fact that the very machine keeping him alive is failing? Or is that happening due to some higher plan composed by Big E himself? Or does the Emperor have several ways to resurrect, and slaying him, such as we see in the Cypher novel, could be just one? The reason this is a potential threat to the Imperium is twofold. Either the Emperor could be reborn, and having suffered so horribly for so long, could be quite mad by this point in time, truly believing himself a god. Should this occur, it is entirely possible that a living god emperor may just be more terrible than the pantheon themselves. Were this to occur, do you think his sons will sit idly by? Or would the likes of Rabute or the Lion take it upon themselves to plunge their own weapon into their father reborn, ensuring such a thing is finished before it truly begins? Should the Emperor be resurrected in the very same mindset he was during and prior to the heresy, that is propagating his imperial truth as well as denying his divinity, I couldn't even begin to explain the ramifications to not only the trillions of citizens across the Imperium, but also to the institutions as well as foundations mankind's power is built upon throughout the entire galaxy. There is no way the likes of the ecclesiarchy, sororitas, Black Templars, or even many of the Inquisition would believe for an instant that that was the real Emperor. They would likely either believe him an imposter, or that he had been infected by either a Chaos or Xenos influence in some way. For the likes of these fanatics, their minds would quite literally break should the Emperor truly be proven not to be divine. Will the Emperor Reborn be the only being able to persuade the human race he is not divine though? Or will his time on the Golden Throne have persuaded him of his own divinity? As a lot of people may well suspect, the return of the Emperor could prove the final death knell for the Imperium of man as we know it. Abaddon may not have to dispatch armies to Terra in a mirror of his ancient Gene Father's efforts, after all. As far as my thoughts go, the Imperium of man is in a more dire situation than ever, with numerous powerful threats encroaching upon its domain throughout the breadth of the galaxy. This is an exciting time for those of us who are keen on new lore developments within the setting, though equally I do hope they're rolled out at a slower, more steady pace so that the lore revelations can continue to evolve over the years, as I personally do not want the setting to rush towards an end-time situation, or contrarily, to grow stale with little more evolving narrative left to explore. As I've said in previous videos, it does seem like the growing power of almost every faction in the setting is all leading to a major event or reset, and I don't think it's coincidence that, at the same time, the Emperor is seemingly attempting to be resurrected. What do you think though? Do you believe there is a reset on the horizon, however distant it may be? Or do you think the Emperor's resurrection will fizz out and not go anywhere? Also, I'd like to know your opinion on the greatest threat to mankind in the 40k lore right now. Are the big bad of the tyranids going to one-up the necrons' efforts from the beginning of 9th, or will it hit with a bang, then go quiet? Likewise, do you agree with the threat level against each faction in this video? Or are there factions you think should take the place of some on this list? Make sure you comment below, or even come over to the Discord, which the link is in the description, and have a chat there. If you're someone who also enjoys the tabletop game, I'd love seeing some of your work posted. Maybe it would inspire me to get to painting a bit more. If you enjoy the content but you aren't yet subscribed, I'd really appreciate it if you consider subbing to the channel. Likewise, a like and comment really helps to push out the video to more people. As always, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate the support, and I'll see you next week. Take it easy and have a good one.